Well, I didn't save my texture, so if for some reason you had hit Q and you got out of the texturing, you might want to go back into it. So again, just go to rendering, go to texturing, hit the 3D paint tool, hit the option box, and it should pop back up. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure you hit Save Textures. For some reason, I thought this had the update on Stroke On by default, but it did not. So I actually lost the previous one. So I'm just going to click on Save Textures, and that will actually save it. You see right here, it saved it to the source images. I thought mine was saved. I didn't know because it wouldn't let me undo, so I assumed it was saving on every stroke, such as it does, but it did not. So that's pretty cool. So anyway, I'm going to hit Q. Make sure you do that because otherwise you do not have your image. And just so you get an idea of what that actually did, is if you go to your project folder, right, that we've been saving our dinos in there, the Maya scenes, the actual image itself gets saved into the source images, and then because we painted it in Maya, usually your images are in here, but the ones done in Maya are right here, so you can actually see this is the image that was actually created. Anyway, that wasn't there before. I thought it was saving, it wasn't, so make sure you do that. All right, so what we're going to do now is, first off, we should save this, so Control-Shift, that was Control-Shift-A, Control-Shift-S, and just save as the next version. So whatever version you're on, so _V0. A lot of times people ask me, how often should you save? You should save as often as you don't mind losing the work that you've been doing. So I would say, whatever makes sense for you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do the actual lighting and all that jazz. All right. So, so let's go to Create Lights. And then you'll see how we have a couple options here. We have ambient light, directional light, point light, spotlight, area light, volume light. I'm not going to get into all the lights because there's just a lot with that too. We're going to get more into that later on. But for now, we'll just do directional light just because they're the simplest. So click on directional light. It's going to put it at origin in the center. So just hit W and just pull it above the wherever your thing is. And if you want, you can scale it bigger and smaller so it's easier to get to. I'm going to pull this off and click that off. Okay, so we're going to put up there. Now, here's the thing. The way directional lights work is it does not matter where they originate, meaning like it doesn't matter where they are in the scene. They could be anywhere. They're like the wind. They basically just, from infinite direction to infinite direction, they just light straight across. That's how it works. So it doesn't matter where you put it. You just need to put it where you can see it. Where you put it beyond that doesn't matter. The only thing that does matter is the rotation and the settings therein. So with this light selected, instead of using the channel box, you'll notice the channel box only gives me really info on like the most base info, which for the most part is a transform. So you translate, rotate, scale, things that deal with its positioning. I want to open up the attribute editor, which is right here. This one. You can see it showed up over here. I'm just going to grab this guy and I'm going to snap it as part of these tabs. Going to drag it into there. Okay. And now when you have the attribute editor as opposed to the channel box, which just gives me this, I think it's Control A is the hotkey. Anyway, it'll give me information about this. Okay. So now what I want you to do is we're going to make a light that generally comes down in one direction. We're going to have what we call our key light. This is like our actual practical light. This is our main light. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to kind of aim it down and at him across. So I'm picturing I'm going to take a photo from like, let's say here. Okay. So I'm going to have that kind of come down and across so that way you can see it dimensionally. In order to see what we're doing, I can turn on lights. So that turns on lights and now you can kind of see it reacting. And then I'm also going to turn on shadows. And that way I can see shadows as well. And if you want it even better, you can hit this, which will, it doesn't really help much. But basically anti-aliases the image. Okay, so we're going to do that and that. That looks fine. Now I just need to do some adjustments. So for the color, I like to put just at least a little bit of color in all of my lights. It doesn't even matter what it is, but I'm just going to make this one a little bit of yellow in there. And then the intensity, I'm going to do 1.25. Illuminates by default, that's just an on-off switch. Emit diffuse, it just means it's going to light the surface. And emit specular means that if there is a specular thing, it's going to create the highlight. And the next thing I need to do is I'm going to open up my shadows, and you'll see there's depth map shadows and there's ray trace shadows. You want to turn on ray trace shadows, that's it. That's good enough, okay? So that's going to be our main light. But if you look, you'll see this is pure black. Shadows are not generally pure black. Usually there's light is constantly bouncing off of everything everywhere all the time. So we need to make lights. What we're going to do is make some fill lights that are basically just going to fill in this shadow. And then also, you see how like this is just pure black here as well? We're going to make ones that fill in that. So we're just going to add a couple of helper lights. Now I could again go create lights. Instead, I'm just going to select this guy and hit Control D to duplicate. So I'm just going to, and then I'm just going to move it over, okay? And just so that I know it's a helper light, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some adjustments. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to take the color, and I'm going to make this one more of a coolish blue, right? Because I want the shadows to be a little bit blue. And I'm going to take the intensity, and this is not my main light, so it should be considerably less. So we're going to do, let's do 0.6, okay? So that'll weaken that up. And then down here, I don't want it to create shadows, because here's what's going to happen. I didn't do it yet, but see how we get multiple shadows? That is not good. It's just it's confusing, and it doesn't look good. So down where it says shadows, you're just going to scroll down where it says shadows, turn ray tracing off. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit E for rotate, so make sure you have it selected, hit E. And I'm going to rotate this, basically going more or less kind of in the opposite direction. So this one's coming down this way, I'm going to have this one come across, so it should hopefully light the opposite, okay? So that will help fill in some of this, right? It filled in this, and it filled in a little bit there. And then I'm going to make another light that's going to hopefully fill in the rest of where it's dark. So I'm going to take this guy, I'm just going to duplicate it again, Control D, W, and I'm just going to move him over again. And then I'm going to take this one, I'm going to have this one kind of come up and over this way. So basically this one's going to get everything that's underneath and up that direction, okay? Hopefully you can kind of see how I have these lights. So the main key light is coming from up here down and across. And then this one here is coming from over here and towards us. Then this one is coming from us up and over, all right? So I'm going to change the color of this too. It's a good idea to change all the colors at least a little bit. And I'm going to give this one a little bit of a greenish tone. And the reason why is that I'm picturing this being the light that's being reflected off of the grass. And we're going to make this even weaker. I'm going to do like 0.5, we'll try. And I don't want the specular. So you see how it's adding to the specular highlight? I don't want it to do that. And actually, this one here, I also want to turn off specular. So turn off specular. It already doesn't have ray trace shadows, that's fine. So the rest of it is good. So now you just want to kind of direct it and see if you can get it to look the way that you want. I'm going to grab this. I'm just going to scale it up bigger so that it's in my shadow there. That's better. Good. Okay. So now we have our dinosaur and we have lighting. But this is only a preview. This isn't actually what it would look like. So what I need to do is actually do a render. So to test render it, we just up here deals with basically the rendering stuff. This one here next to the Eye of Saruman, or Sauron, we're going to click on that. And it's going to open up this, and it's going to try and give me an Arnold render. Which Arnold render is nice, don't get me wrong, it looks nice, but we would have to make some more adjustments. Because you can see, for one, it's not abiding by my shadow thing. So if you have Arnold render on, that's fine. Just you can let it go, or if you hit escape, it will actually stop the render. I want you to click on this and switch to Maya software, and then hit render. And you're going to see we're going to get something that looks like this, okay? So Arnold render is actually a lot better. That's like what they use professionally, and later on, maybe I'll show you some of that, but we're going to stick to Maya software just because it's simpler, and we're just trying to bang something out, just so you get a good breadth of an idea of how 3D works. Okay, so you see it, that looks like junk. You can see we don't have shadows, which is weird, right? And it's very flat. So we're going to try and fix some of that. So to do that, what we're going to do is we need to get to the render settings. So you can see we have all these little clap traps here. You'll see the one with the gear on it. That's the settings. Okay, click on that. So this one. And then right here is where actually you can choose the type of render you want. So you see there's Maya Hardware or Hardware 2.0. That's basically just what we're always seeing. Vector I've never used, but we want software. That's the built-in one. Then once you do that, this is common stuff if you're rendering out an image sequence. These are like settings of where it's going to save, what the file name is going to be, how many frames it's going to render from what camera, things like that. They don't actually deal with the quality. The next tab is the one that deals with the actual software render settings, okay? And if you do Arnold, it has even more tabs, but we're just going to do this one. I want you to switch the quality to production quality. And then, which you think this would be on by default, but it's not. Scroll down to where it says ray tracing quality and turn on ray tracing. Because you got to remember, it's a two-part system. We might be able to create all sorts of lights, but if the renderer, the camera and stuff, aren't accepting those settings, then it isn't going to make any difference. That should be better. Oh, and I want to do one other thing. So we do those two things and actually go back to common, and we want to change the resolution of this. So go back to common, scroll all the way down, and you'll see it says HD 540. I'm sorry, 960 by 540 is not an HD resolution. I'm willing to accept to some extent 720p, 1280 by 720. I usually render in that because it takes time, but that is not HD. So switch from there, and let's do a 2K square. So it's gonna be 2048 by 2048. So it's not going to be a 16 by 9 aspect ratio that you would usually see for film. We're just going to do a square 2048 by 2048. Should be nice and clean. So just make sure you do that and hit close. Now, go ahead and hit this while this render view is still open, and it should fix the render. You're going to notice it's going to take a little bit longer now because now it actually has to do the ray tracing. If you guys are big into video games and stuff, you probably have seen stuff where they say, oh, no, this Xbox, whatever the new one's called, it supports ray tracing shadows. Basically, the old school, they used to use depth map shadows, which I didn't use here. But as you can see, as we're doing this, ray tracing shadows are just another way of calculating shadows and reflections and things like that. But they're expensive. Computationally, they take a lot of processing power. So that's why it's like a big deal to have that in there. That's why if you ever played a game and like there's a mirror in the game or you can see reflections, you actually aren't seeing reflections. They're faked through whatever they do. They're not actual real reflections. So if we look here, we can see our dinosaur. He looks fantabulous. Now, if you need to make adjustments, just select these lights and you can brighten them, darken them, change the direction of them. You can go to the materials themselves. So I could select this guy, or actually just do it this way. I go to the materials, and you could superficially, like if it's still the reflection, I could turn that all the way down. If you want it shiny or less shiny, I don't know, all these different settings in here. You can play around with that as well. But you see, it's really far away. Generally speaking, you want to be as close to the subject as possible. So I can't really tell what it's going to render, because you can even see my aspect ratio here, right, is kind of rectilinear. I mean, it's all rectilinear, but it's very much closer to a rectangle, and obviously I'm rendering out a square. So in order to see that, what I'm going to do is put on the resolution gate, which is this blue ball and box thing. So click on that, and it's going to show you it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually squeeze this way. There we go. And now I can see, if I make my aspect ratio of my viewport, that's what this area is called, the same as my image, then I can kind of see what I'm doing. And I can see, yeah, it's really small. So I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. Whoops. There we go. Okay. And we're going to call that good. So now I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Le Render again. And I'm going to pause it this time, so you don't have to wait, and then when it's done, I'll show you what to do. Okay, so it made it really big here, so I'm just gonna click and drag to minimize, or to make the window a bit smaller. All right, and you can see here we go. There's our render. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna manually save this instead of rendering out using the batch render. That's like another thing, but we're just gonna manually save it. So you just right-click on it, File, Save Image. A little window is going to pop up here, and it's going to save it right to the images folder of your project folder. By default, it's automatically going to save things inside of that project folder, because that's where we initially set up the project. So that's why it's so important to have that project folder. If you don't make that, it's going to save it wherever. Okay. So I want you to choose the PNG, okay, and also choose Color Managed. and then you can just name it like, I don't know, animal pick. It's fine. Or actually, animal render would be better. Animal render, and then hit save. Boom. There you go. Okay. So now it's time to submit your assignment. Okay. So we've rendered it, and it's ready to submit. What time is it? Okay. I'm just gonna make a quick little video on how to do that on a separate one because I like to keep them smaller, and then you guys can just, you can see them and pop through them. Okay. So we'll do that in the next one. But basically, your job is done. The next thing to do is just to submit it.